My thumb froze over my phone screen as the text message from my mother materialized. "We're only having your sister's family this year." No explanation, no apology, just 11 words erasing me from Thanksgiving like I was an inconvenient dinner reservation. The blood rushed to my ears, creating a strange pulsing sound as I stared at the message outside my window. Colorado snow was beginning to fall on my $6 million estate, the one my family had no idea existed. "Have a good time," I typed back, my hands surprisingly steady. Then I set the phone face down on the granite kitchen island and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. For 32 years, I'd been the afterthought in my family's story. But standing there, watching snowflakes gather on the pine trees surrounding my mountain retreat, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. This time, I wasn't the one being left out. I was the one making the guest list. My name is Victoria. I'm 32, and I built a tech company worth millions while my family was busy ignoring me. This is the story of how I created the Thanksgiving that finally made them see me. Growing up, I learned early that our household revolved around my older sister, Natalie. My parents, Evelyn and James, had constructed our family dynamic like a spotlight. With only one target, Natalie was their masterpiece. The homecoming queen with perfect grades who married into a prestigious family. I was the supporting character who existed in the shadows. When I won second place in the state science fair at 14, I stood in our kitchen clutching my ribbon while my parents paced back and forth on the phone. Natalie made varsity cheer as a sophomore. My mother gushed to relatives. "Isn't she incredible?" My father was already dialing my grandparents to share the real news. I quietly set my ribbon on the counter and walked upstairs. No one noticed it was missing the next morning. At 15, I created a photo sorting app that could recognize faces before that technology was mainstream. I raced downstairs to show my father, practically vibrating with excitement. He glanced at my laptop screen for exactly 6 seconds. I counted them before saying, "That's good, Victoria," and turning to tell my mother about Natalie being nominated for homecoming court. When MIT accepted me, my mother's first words weren't congratulations. "That's far from home, isn't it?" she said, frowning slightly. My father added, "If that's what you want." They didn't visit once in 4 years. Not for Parents' Weekend, not for my honors ceremony, not even when I graduated with distinction. Instead, I watched their vacations unfold on social media Florida beaches and California wine tours, always with Natalie and her husband Tyler in the photos. Tyler's family represented everything my parents aspired to be: wealthy, connected, socially important. When Natalie married him, the wedding had 8 bridesmaids in matching lilac dresses. I wasn't one of them. I spent most of the reception helping the catering staff because someone mentioned they were short-handed. My mother cried during Natalie's father-daughter dance while I restocked water glasses. No one noticed I wasn't at my assigned table. After college, I threw myself into work at tech companies around Boston, learning through brutal trial and error how to survive in a cutthroat industry. When my first startup failed at 26, I called my father seeking advice. His response was immediate and cutting. "You're not cut out for business, Victoria. Be practical like your sister." I hung up, stared at the wall of my tiny apartment, and promised myself I'd never ask them for help again. Grandma Paula was the exception. She called every Sunday to ask how I was really doing. No pretense, no comparison to Natalie. "One day you'll build something they can't ignore," she told me once. She didn't know how prophetic those words would be. I reread my mother's message that night, the blue glow reflecting in my dark kitchen window. "We're only having your sister's family this year." 11 simple words that felt like they'd been rehearsing them my whole life. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I just stood there, letting the quiet weight of exclusion settle around me like an old familiar coat. The anger I felt wasn't hot or explosive anymore. It had cooled into something harder, more deliberate. A calm certainty that had been years in the making. Between their last dismissal and this text message, something fundamental had changed. I was no longer the person desperate for their approval. I thought about all the versions of me they'd dismissed. The girl with the science fair ribbon, the college student they never visited, the entrepreneur who asked for guidance and received criticism instead. I could still hear my father's voice through the phone that day. Be practical like your sister. Maybe that's what they'd always wanted, for me to stay small, predictable, easy to categorize. Maybe that's why they never asked questions after I stopped sharing details about my life, because if they didn't know, they couldn't be wrong. What they didn't know was that last year, I had sold my cybersecurity company for $320 million. The ink on the contract was barely dry when I bought this property. 50 acres of pristine Colorado mountainside with a 6-bedroom main house, guest cottage, and views that made even the sky look expensive. It wasn't just a home, it was proof that I had flourished without them. I hadn't told anyone about the sale or the property. Not Grandma Paula, not even my closest friends from MIT. I wanted to keep something that was purely mine, untouched by comparison or commentary. But now, looking at that text message, something clicked into place. I wasn't the one left out. They were. The next morning, fresh snow blanketed the mountains outside my window, transforming the landscape into something new and pristine. For the first time in years, I wasn't dreading Thanksgiving, I was redesigning it. I opened my laptop and started making calls, beginning with Uncle Henry. "What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" I asked casually. He hesitated. "Your mom said it's just immediate family this year." "Right," I answered softly. "Guess that means us outcasts stick together." One by one, I called everyone who had been a fixture at our family Thanksgivings. Aunt Linda and her 3 kids, Aunt Carol, Uncle Stephen and his wife Karen, cousins from both sides of the family. Every single one gave the same response. "Your mom told us she's keeping it small this year." By the time I finished the last call, the pattern was clear. My parents had cut 20 relatives from their guest list. Not because there wasn't space, but because Natalie's in-laws were more impressive doctors, lawyers, old money Polish. Our family had become a performance, and anyone who didn't enhance the image was edited out. I leaned back in my chair, watching the sun turn the snow-covered peaks to gold. Then I called the one person I trusted completely. Grandma Paula picked up on the second ring. "Victoria, sweetheart." "Grandma," I said, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. "How do you feel about spending Thanksgiving in Colorado?" She laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "As long as I don't have to cook, I'm in." "Perfect, and bring your appetite." That afternoon, I started planning in earnest. I called Marco, a private chef from Denver who'd worked at a Michelin-starred restaurant. I hired a professional photographer. I arranged flights, hotel rooms, and car services for 35 guests. Everyone I invited sounded both shocked and delighted. Most hadn't seen me in years. None knew what I'd built. Over the next 2 weeks, I finalized all the arrangements while Grandma secretly booked her flight from Ohio without telling my parents. We coordinated by text so she would arrive just in time for the Thanksgiving meal. As I moved through the house, past the stone fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows, checking guest rooms and finalizing details, the space seemed to vibrate with purpose. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming something I'd lost years ago, a sense of belonging on my own terms. By the end of the week, everything was set. Flights booked, personalized gifts wrapped, guest rooms prepared. Each room held a small token that showed I'd been paying attention even when they hadn't fly rods for the uncles who loved fishing, handmade jewelry for my art teacher cousins, first edition books for the readers. That night, as I reviewed the final guest list, my phone lit up with a text from Natalie. "Hey, just checking. What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" I smiled and typed back, "Spending it with family who actually wants me there." Thanksgiving morning dawned under a perfect blue sky. Sunlight spilled across fresh snow, turning the world outside my windows into a postcard. Inside, the air already smelled like rosemary, butter, and wood smoke as Marco orchestrated his team in the kitchen. My guests would start arriving within the hour. I stood at the window holding a mug of coffee, feeling strangely calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't pretending or waiting to be noticed. This day was mine. The first car pulled up at 9:15 a.m. Uncle Stephen and Karen stepped out, their faces lifting toward the house in undisguised awe. "Holy hell, Victoria," Stephen said when I opened the door. "This is yours." "All mine," I said, smiling. "Welcome home." Karen looked around, eyes wide. It's beautiful. I can't believe your parents didn't want to see this. Their loss, I said, and meant it. Over the next 2 hours, the house filled with laughter and footsteps. Aunt Linda arrived with her college-aged kids. Aunt Carol brought a homemade pie. Cousins hugged me at the door like they hadn't seen me in decades. People wandered through the rooms, running their hands over the walls, taking pictures, gasping at the mountain view. My MIT friends Rachel and Ethan flew in from Boston, whistling when they saw the guest house where they'd be staying. Tech CEO life suits you, Rachel said, squeezing my arm. I'd texted them directions to the guest cottage earlier that morning, knowing they'd prefer their own space. By noon, everyone had settled in. Some helped in the kitchen, others gathered by the fire, trading family stories I'd never heard. The sound of genuine laughter echoed through the rooms, real, unfiltered joy. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet one on the sidelines. I was at the center, not because I demanded it, but because I'd built it. At 2 p.m., Marco carried out the turkey on a massive silver platter. The dining room glowed with candles and conversation. 2 long tables stretched end to end, draped in white linen and covered with dishes I'd requested from my childhood, my grandmother's sweet potato recipe, maple glazed carrots, 3 different kinds of pie. Everyone took their seats, and for a moment I just stood there, taking it all in. This was what family should feel like, connection without comparison. I lifted my glass. I just want to say thank you all for coming. This means more to me than you know. I wanted to spend today with people who actually want to be here. Hear, hear, several voices murmured, glasses rising. Uncle Henry smiled and added, to Victoria, who built all this from nothing and was kind enough to share it with us. The moment hung in the air, warm and real. I opened my mouth to reply when a car door slammed outside. Everyone turned toward the window. A taxi idled at the gate. The passenger door opened and out stepped Grandma Paula, coat buttoned against the cold suitcase in hand, eyes sparkling like she'd just pulled off the greatest trick of her life. I ran to the door. Grandma, you made it. You think I was going to miss this? She said, hugging me tight. I told your parents I wasn't feeling well enough to travel. Then I bought a ticket online, figured it out all by myself too. I helped Grandma with her suitcase as we walked up the path to the front door, where everyone waited to greet her. She beamed at the crowd gathering in the entryway, clearly delighted her surprise had worked perfectly. The room erupted in laughter. She fit right in, moving from person to person, hugging everyone, eating 2 full plates of food. The afternoon unfolded like something from a movie. Kids ran outside in the snow. Music played through hidden speakers. People gathered around the fireplace sharing stories I'd never heard about my own family. When the photographer arrived, we took group photos on the back deck with the mountains behind us. Everyone smiled so wide it almost hurt to look at. This is the happiest Thanksgiving I've ever seen, the photographer kept saying. Later that evening, after dessert, I sat beside Grandma Paula near the fire. She leaned toward me and said quietly, You know, I'm proud of you, Victoria. You didn't just survive. You made a place for everyone else to belong. My throat tightened. I wanted to say thank you, but before I could, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Then it buzzed again, and again. Notifications stacked on top of each other, messages, calls, social media tags. I picked up the phone and stared. Photos from our day were flooding online. Best Thanksgiving ever at Victoria's Colorado estate. Who needs Ohio when you've got the Rockies? You're grateful for family that shows up. Some people talk about family. Others rebuild it from scratch. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. The last post stopped me cold. Rachel had tagged me in a group photo, everyone smiling with arms around each other, mountains glowing in the background. The caption read, Some people talk about family. Some people rebuild it. Then the calls started. My mother, my father, Natalie. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Grandma raised an eyebrow. Go on, she said. See what they have to say. I answered, Hi, Mom. Her voice came through sharp and nervous. What is going on? Why are there pictures of you hosting Thanksgiving in Colorado? Why is your grandmother there? We thought she was sick. She was sick. I said evenly. Sick of your Thanksgiving plans? There was a pause. Then my father's voice in the background. Where did you get the money for all this? I sold my company last year, I said. $320 million. The silence that followed was so long I could hear the fireplace crackling. Then my mother whispered, Why didn't you tell us? I tried, I said, my voice steady. Last Christmas, you were too busy talking about Natalie's son's piano recital. My father's voice rose, hard and defensive. You made us look bad, Victoria. Everyone's talking about this. I let out a breath. I didn't make you do anything. You uninvited half the family because they weren't good enough for Natalie's in-laws. I just invited them here instead. Natalie's voice came next, tight and anxious. Do you know what this looks like? Our Thanksgiving looks pathetic compared to yours. That's not my problem, I said quietly. Then another voice cut through the chaos. Grandma Paula stood beside me and said, Put it on speaker. I did. Mom? My father asked, startled. You're there? Of course I'm here, she said, calm and clear. And it's about time you listen to someone other than yourselves. She took a slow breath. You've taken Victoria for granted her whole life. You pushed her aside, made her feel small so you could polish Natalie's crown. And now you're embarrassed because the world saw it. She didn't do this to hurt you. She did it because she wanted to spend the holiday with people who care about her. Nobody spoke. The silence on the other end was heavy. My father mumbled something that sounded like, We'll talk later, and hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time, my heartbeat finally slowing. Grandma squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, she said. I don't know, I whispered. Maybe I was being petty. No, she said softly. You were being honest. There's a difference. Outside, snow had started to fall again, thick and slow. Inside, laughter picked back up. Music hummed through the speakers, and warmth filled every corner of the house. As the night faded, I looked around at the cousins, aunts, and friends who'd flown across the country to be here. My phone was still buzzing somewhere on the counter, but I didn't care. I finally had what I'd been waiting for my whole life, a seat at my own table. A week passed before I answered any of their calls. By then, the snow around the estate had deepened, softening the world into silence. When I finally unlocked my phone, there were dozens of messages waiting. The first was from Natalie. I've always been jealous of you. You gotta choose your own path. I just did what Mom and Dad wanted. I'm sorry they hurt you because of me. I stared at her words for a long time, unsure whether to believe them. Still, it didn't sound like the sister who once told me I wasn't bridesmaid material. It sounded human. I typed back, Thanks for saying that. Oh, it was all I could manage. Then came a text from my father. Grandma was right. We were unfair. I'm proud of you, Victoria. An hour later, one from my mother. The house looked beautiful in the photos. Can we come see it? I didn't reply right away. I read the messages over and over, trying to tell whether this was guilt or something closer to understanding. For days, I kept the phone on my nightstand, silent. Finally, I sent a short response. Come for Christmas. Just you, Dad, and Natalie. The weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas passed quickly as I prepared for my parents' visit. The estate looked even more beautiful with holiday decorations and fresh snow covering the mountains. They arrived 3 weeks later. A taxi wound up the long drive through the snow, stopping at the front steps. When they got out, they just stood there, heads tilted back, eyes wide at the sight of glass and stone against the white. My father's voice cracked. First, Victoria, this is incredible. Inside, they moved slowly through the rooms, touching things like they were afraid they might break. They stopped in front of the wall where I'd framed the magazine covers. Forbes, Business Insider, the articles about my company, CyberShield. My father traced a headline with his finger. You never told us, he said quietly. I tried, I answered. You just weren't listening. At dinner that night, the silence was gentler. My mother set her fork down and looked at me. "We failed you," she said simply. "We pushed Natalie too hard and didn't give you what you needed. I'm sorry." My father nodded. "We can't change the past, but we want to start over." I didn't trust the moment completely, but for once I didn't need to. Grandma Paula raised her glass and smiled. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to people who finally showed up." The table clinked with quiet laughter. Snow fell outside, soft and endless. For the first time in years, the air around us felt warm. On Christmas night, after the dishes were washed and the fire burned low, I walked out onto the deck. The mountains were black against the snow, the sky full of quiet stars. Behind me, I could hear laughter. My parents and Natalie playing cards with Grandma Paula. The sound oddly easy, almost normal. I wrapped my coat tighter and smiled to myself. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But maybe that was okay. The girl who used to beg to be seen was gone. In her place stood a woman who built her own seat at the table and invited others to join. Family isn't who invites you first. It's who shows up when you're not needed. I took one last look at the house glowing behind me, then whispered, "Finally." Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one. The knife in my chest wasn't real, but it felt that way as my mother's words sliced through the holiday chatter. "Sometimes I wish you were never born." She delivered it casually over chocolate cake, fork suspended mid-air, eyes fixed on me. The dining room seemed to tilt sideways as everyone, except me, erupted in laughter. My fingers tightened around the stem of my wine glass until I felt it might snap. Sweat beaded between my shoulder blades while my vision narrowed to pinpoints of light. The candle flames, my mother's diamond earrings, the tears of mirth in my sister's eyes. I set my napkin down with surgical precision and spoke softly into their laughter. "Well, Amanda, the feeling is mutual. The only difference? I actually have the power to make that wish come true." The room went silent. Silent in the way. Glass breaks. A crystalline moment suspended before the shatter. My name is Laura. I'm 32 and a high school English teacher. This is the story of how I erased myself from my family and forced them to see exactly what they'd lost. I was the middle child of 3 daughters in a household where invisibility was my inheritance. Jessica, the eldest at 35, had claimed the role of golden achiever. Law degree, partnership track, husband with connections. Amanda, the youngest at 29, was the cherished artist, temperamental, dramatic, perpetually finding herself while living in our parents' basement. And then there was me, wedged between their spotlights, existing in the negative space. The pattern had been established early. At 10, I won a district-wide writing competition. My mother glanced at the certificate before turning to Jessica's science project. "This might actually get her a scholarship," she murmured, as if I weren't standing there. When I performed my first solo in choir at 12, my father's only comment was a vague, "Nice hobby," while Amanda's rudimentary watercolors earned pride of place on the refrigerator gallery. By adulthood, my role had calcified. I was the mediator, the peacekeeper, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays while my own blurred together. Store-bought cake with my name misspelled one year, forgotten entirely the next. I was furniture in human form, necessary but unremarkable. That Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to be a celebration of Jessica's promotion to senior partner. My mother had polished the good china, prepared lasagna from scratch. My father glowed with anticipation before we even sat down. The meal unfolded with excruciating predictability. Jessica regaled us with courtroom victories and plans for a vacation home. Amanda scrolled through photos of abstract paintings while everyone leaned in with exaggerated interest. When my turn came, I mentioned a student who had just won a regional writing competition, a shy boy I'd spent months mentoring. "That's nice, honey," my mother said absently, already turning away. "Jess, tell us more about that case you won." The dismissal stung but wasn't surprising. I forced the familiar smile, the one I'd perfected through decades of such moments. Tight-lipped, eyes not quite participating. I became wallpaper again, watching my family's performance from the outside. After dinner, as my father raised yet another toast to Jessica, I found myself tracing the rim of my glass, half present, wondering why I still came to these gatherings. The weight of 32 years of erasure pressed against my ribs with each breath. When dessert arrived, my mother's chocolate cake, frosted to perfection, the reminiscing began. Jessica and Amanda launched into stories of childhood pranks, each one with me as the punchline. "Remember when we convinced Catherine she was adopted?" Jessica laughed. "She cried for 3 days," Amanda added, wiping tears of mirth. "Poor Catherine," my mother chuckled, "so gullible." My father's laugh was so robust, he nearly dropped his fork. I maintained my thin smiles while something inside me began to crystallize, not breaking, but hardening. Then came Amanda's coup de grace, leaning forward with wine-flushed cheeks. "Sometimes I wish you were never born." The laughter that followed confirmed what I'd always known but never admitted. I wasn't just overlooked, I was actively unwanted. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I replayed Amanda's words and the chorus of laughter that endorsed them. The truth revealed itself with merciless clarity. They would never see me. Not as a teacher, not as a daughter, not as a person worthy of basic dignity. The weight of this realization should have crushed me. Instead, it crystallized into something sharp-edged and powerful. I opened my laptop, fingers trembling, not with hurt, but with purpose. First, I checked my bank account. The modest savings I'd accumulated while my sisters received family loans for art supplies and law school. Next, I researched teaching positions in Seattle, Portland, Denver, cities far enough away to make casual visits impossible. By dawn, 5 applications were submitted. But disappearing wasn't enough. Not anymore. If they wished I'd never existed, they would feel the full impact of that wish. Not just my absence, but the collapse of the family structure I'd silently maintained. I created a document and titled it The Invisible Daughter. In it, I methodically listed every slight, every dismissal, every forgotten birthday, and minimized achievement. 32 years of evidence. Then I wrote a series of letters, one to each family member, clinical in their precision, devastating in their honesty. For the next 3 weeks, I maintained appearances. I showed up for Sunday dinners, nodded at appropriate moments, played my assigned role while secretly dismantling my life in preparation for vanishing. I sold furniture, donated clothes, packed essentials. When Seattle West High School offered me a position starting mid-semester, I accepted immediately. The day before my departure, I delivered the letters. Not in person, but timed to arrive simultaneously at their respective homes and workplaces. I used certified mail with delivery confirmation scheduled for the same hour, ensuring my words would reach them all at once. Each contained a piece of the family tapestry they'd never bothered to see. How Jessica's harmless competitiveness had crossed into cruelty. How Amanda's artistic sensitivity was actually selfish manipulation. How our parents had not just allowed, but encouraged this dynamic, feeding their egos through their favored daughters while sacrificing the third. My phone exploded with notifications as they received my words. I watched the screen light up from across the room, a silent fireworks display of too late concern. Jessica called 17 times in an hour. Amanda texted, "You're overreacting. It was just a joke." My father's voicemail. "Sweetheart, please call us." My mother showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. "Catherine, please, let's talk about this." I sat motionless on my packed suitcase, listening to her voice break. For once, I was the one with power, the one making others wait, the one deciding whether a relationship continued. I didn't open the door. The next morning, I boarded a flight to Seattle. As the plane lifted off, I felt something unusual. Lightness, the burden of being their emotional support, their mediator, their punchline, all left behind on the tarmac. In Seattle, I became visible. Principal Reynolds welcomed me as a breath of fresh air. Colleagues sought my input. Students looked at me, really looked, when I spoke. My small apartment filled with books and plants and sunlight, each item chosen solely for my pleasure. I changed my phone number, my email address, my social media accounts. I became unreachable, unknowable. I left just one connection to my past, Mrs. Hendricks, my elderly neighbor who had always treated me with genuine kindness. I gave her my new email address with strict instructions to use it only for true emergencies. Through her occasional updates, I heard fragments. Thanksgiving was canceled. Jessica and Amanda, without me to buffer their competing egos, clashed violently. My father drank too much. My mother lost weight. 6 months passed, then a year. The letters continued to arrive at my old address, forwarded by the postal service until that too expired. I read each one, noting the progression: anger, bargaining, depression. My mother's handwriting grew shakier, my father's notes shorter, Jessica's tone less certain. Amanda stopped writing entirely. On the anniversary of my disappearance, a final envelope arrived, thicker than the others, bearing my father's handwriting. Inside was a check for a substantial amount and a short note. Your inheritance. Early. You were always the strongest of us. Beneath it was a family photo from my childhood, creased and coffee-stained. In it, I stood slightly apart, already half erased. My mother had written on the back, "We see you now. Too late." I donated the money to a scholarship fund for overlooked students. The photo I placed in a drawer, not displayed, not discarded, a relic of a former life. I never responded to my father's gesture, letting the silence speak for me. 2 years after moving to Seattle, I met David at a literary festival. He asked about the novel in my hands, and we debated the ending with equal passion. With him, I was never furniture. I was fascinating, essential, seen. Our relationship grew naturally over the following year. Coffee dates became dinners, became weekends exploring the city together. By our second anniversary, we were engaged. Our wedding was small but joyful. My Seattle friends stood witness. His family welcomed me without comparison or qualification. There were no cruel jokes disguised as reminiscence, only genuine warmth. When Mrs. Hendricks emailed to tell me my mother had terminal illness, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. That had come earlier, quietly, for my own peace, but perhaps completion. Through Mrs. Hendricks, I obtained the hospital information and called my mother's room. "Catherine." Her voice was thin, disbelieving. "It's Laura now," I corrected gently. I changed it legally when I moved to Seattle. Catherine was the invisible daughter. Laura is who I became when I was finally seen. The silence stretched between us, 2,000 miles of complicated history. "We broke without you," she finally said. "You were always holding us together, and we never saw it until you were gone." "I know," I replied, neither cruel nor comforting. Simply true. I didn't fly home for her funeral 6 months later. Instead, I lit a candle in Seattle and acknowledged a complicated truth. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is refusing to be erased, not through confrontation, but through radical self-preservation. Jessica reached out through Mrs. Hendricks after the funeral, asking to reconnect. Amanda followed suit a month later. I declined both offers with brief, polite emails. That chapter of my life was closed permanently. The relationships too damaged to rebuild. When our daughter was born the following spring, we named her Hope, because she would never question her place, never doubt her worth, never compete for basic dignity. Looking at her, I understood my journey. Amanda's casual wish had been meant as a curse, but I had transformed it into a blessing. They lost me, but I found myself. The invisible daughter had become a woman fully seen. So if you've ever been dismissed, diminished, or erased by those who should cherish you, remember this: you are not invisible. You are not disposable. Your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. Sometimes walking away is the loudest answer of all. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.